going to get things going then, and then we'll go to the slider. So for me, a question that is on everyone's lips at the moment, and I'd actually like to ask all four of you, and again, a bit of feedback we got from Johannesburg as this is speed dating.
Yeah.
So for the panelists, it's speed dating as to your question. Okay.
2 minutes.
But
In Joburg,
the question is, in terms of cryptocurrencies, is it a good time or a bad time to be investing in cryptocurrencies based on where the world is at the moment today? And let's just go left to right. Vu, we'll start with you.
Scott, yeah, I mean, I think I illustrated this earlier on one of the
So,
slides.
by the way, we are not giving financial advice. This is his opinion.
Yeah, please. As I said earlier in my presentation, I think personally, for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, the general context around where internet adoption is as a trend for specifically this particular technology is fairly early and it's in infancy. So it's likely to grow. David's going to go into some more technical details as we heard in Durban, but I think just to keep it under 2 minutes is to say absolutely no doubt, but personally do your own research, kind of gain your own knowledge at a personal level. Don't outsource that decision whether or not you participate to somebody else. It's an incredibly complex space, so do your own reading, follow the different Facebook groups, and try and be selective around where you find your source of your information. But absolutely no doubt that you should get into the space if you get the opportunity.
So I'd say ditto to that, and use the crowd's power to your advantage. Bad actors, the crowd will tell you about them, and use it as a learning experience. Don't ever use money that you can't afford to lose.
I've been talking about Bitcoin for a long time, and I hate it when people come to me and say, David, you've been telling me about Bitcoin for so long. Now it's too late. Bitcoin is $10. Or, wow, now it's too late. Bitcoin is $100. Now it's too late. Bitcoin is $1,000. Now it's too late. Bitcoin is $10,000, right? Now, does it mean Bitcoin necessarily is going to go to $100,000? And can I say when, if? Neither of those things are true. For example, Bitcoin was at $1,000, then went back to 300 and stayed at 400 for over a year. And a lot of people were totally dispirited in 2014 or 15, whenever it was. And something like that could still happen. Bitcoin is now, whatever, 8,000, I don't know. Yeah. And it could go to 2,000 and stay there for a year and then do whatever else. But if you listened this morning to what is the nature of exponential technologies, and you realize that unless people prohibit mathematics, Bitcoin and blockchain is going to spread. And today, a very, very tiny percentage of the people heard about it, even fewer own it, even fewer know what it can do. As these things get further understood and more people realize how powerful the technology is, it is bound to spread. And as a consequence, I believe it is bound to gain value in terms of exchange rate. People ask me about this, and then I say, listen, banknotes and checkbooks and even credit cards have been invented a few years ago, credit cards 70 years ago. If you are in a taxi cab in Cape Town, you'd better ask if the taxi driver accepts credit card, and the answer is going to be no, 70 years after this thing has been invented, right? So the spreading is uneven. Yeah. But you heard me talking about swarms of intelligent robots mining the asteroid belt, creating quadrillion-dollar economies. Are they going to use credit cards or banknotes or paper checks to settle resource allocation problems among them? I don't think so. and I don't know whether it is Bitcoin or blockchain or whatever else, this is the kind of technology that is going to make that possible. And it is going to happen from here to there. So in order to be on that wave, that is why you should learn about this, and the best way to learn is to do, which in this case means to own a little piece of Bitcoin.
Thanks, David. How was I put off to David? How am I supposed to compete with that? I think I'm going to sit at the end there, and then David.
You're like an exponentially more intelligent.
Yeah. Who put me here? David.
Sorry.
No, I think.
You're going to move your chair here.
I think David said every word that I was going to say, so what you said. No, but I think absolutely Roger Hamilton is a fantastic mentor, and I think Steve over there, I remember meeting him at numerous events previously. I think the digital currency is most certainly the way forward. Amazon has in fact opened a shop in Seattle, the first shop in Seattle where it's actually contactless completely. So you actually open an Amazon account whereby you walk into the shop and it registers all your details, and as you take items off the shelf, it automatically flags it up onto your account. So even if you put your items back onto the shelf, it will pick it up again. Don't ask me how, ask Roger Hamilton that, but it will actually flag how your items will come on and off the shelf. As you walk outside the shop, it will automatically deduct funds off your account. So, it sort of shows what the technology world is going to, and then the cryptocurrencies and the digital currencies. I think, again, having lived in London for so long, we used to use contactless, and I know it's come here also, but, over there, any transaction that you did on your card was free. So there was no need for you to actually carry any sort of funds whatsoever. And the security behind obviously not carrying that is also a valuable asset. So absolutely, I think it's 100% the way forward, and hopefully the banks will slowly start dissolving and we'll be able to start using the blockchain.
Put it this way, Scott, right? If you believe in Sangomas and you follow the trend lines of the other Sangomas that are on social media, the projected price for 2018 for Bitcoin is going to be $50,000. So we'll see in December, but
I thought
depends on which side of the fence you sit.
I thought it was going to be 11 to 70.
So one comment that I think is important is that, for me, particularly in any technology, is that the only way to learn is to do. And you can come to 50 courses if you want to. Unless you actually get engaged, you're not going to learn. And then also, what I think is quite important is that, you can go on, and Kevin's going to show you from 4 o'clock, you can go on a site like Luna, and you can actually start investing from literally 100 Rand. So there's no real reason that people don't get involved. I personally think, I back up what Kevin said, don't put in stuff that will kill you if you lost it. But also, I do believe it's important to put in enough that you care. I'm serious. If you want to learn something, I always say to people, I'm not sure how many people in this room learn to swim by reading a book. At some point, you had to jump in the pool. And that's what Kevin's going to do from 4 o'clock in terms of the live workshop. Okay, let's get up Slido and see. There's quite a few questions. So the top one there is, given blockchain's potential to disrupt governance, what is the likelihood of Africa leapfrogging representative democracy? What can citizens do to start now? So I would like to put that question to the future president of South Africa, and the president of Singularity University can decide what they both think.
Well, that's a great question, actually. And in fact, this is part of the conversation. In fact, earlier this morning, Kevin would know this, that National Treasury is doing its first workshop around the future tech innovations. And while I was at the back, exchanging emails with National Treasury and ensuring that this community is also part of that conversation, because these things tend to be incredibly selective around who gets exposure to them. And naturally, sometimes these things come into my inbox, and I don't have necessarily all the time by myself. So we try to spread the information. So at one level, the government is very behind, the South African government specifically, and in African terms, the South African government is relatively advanced and evolved. But I think there's a really a strong renewal of focus around Africa now, around where other state governments are really relooking the whole space around e-government, primarily driven by the broader kind of global partners networks that they have. I mean, certainly in the blockchain space, we're seeing what countries like Saudi Arabia are doing now with smart contracts and trying to really convert as much of the government system or infrastructure onto the blockchain and to smooth out the process of whether it's visa issuing or government contracting to the procurement. And all these things really point to one kind of very aggressive growth of enabling citizens and giving people more transparent access into government. And governments are increasingly becoming more embracive of this as we push back and shun corruption. So these things, ironically, with terrorism and all these things that are going on, ironically, as some of the terrible stuff happens, it pushes society towards one common center where everybody has an agreeable view of where society needs to be. And again, like I said, also in my presentation, one of the slides that I added was we all need to get to a place where we have a common agreement around the tools that take us into a common humanity.
What do you think? So, David, in terms of blockchain's potential with regards to governments in Africa and whether some of the more emerging economies will be able to leapfrog some of the first world economies?
This is also an example that I gave during lunch. Imagine, you heard about smart contracts, right? Code that can manipulate wallets and under certain conditions transfers amounts from one to another. So imagine a building in the Wealth Migrate property list where a given percentage, 2%, whatever, of the rents accumulates in a wallet that belongs to the building, not to the owners of the building, to the building itself. And the building has a sensor, and it's Friday night, and the sensor realizes that there is a water leak. And there's nobody to alert the super or whatever, but the building is able to use the amount in the wallet to call an emergency repair service that during the weekend takes care of the leak and everybody's happy, right? This is the power of the Internet of Things coupled with the economic vectors represented by blockchain smart contracts, where people may not need to be in the equation. Why should somebody be there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for a leak to happen that they should monitor during the weekend? That person should be doing something else, hopefully. So extend it a millionfold, and you realize that the opportunity to profoundly transform how our cities and countries work is really astonishing. However, we still want to be in charge. What will it mean to be politically active? What it will mean to participate as a citizen to society is going to radically change. And we see glimpses of that. There are already people who say, yeah, well, of course, I am the citizen of a given country, and I am a resident either there or maybe someplace else. I pay my taxes, obviously. But all the old and horrible patriotism and nationalism that imposes on me to be boxed in so that I am defined by the genetic or geographical happenstance of birth or whatever, that is not who I am. I participate simultaneously in networks that span the entire globe of interest and participation and activism and empowerment that are non-exclusive. I can be in more than one at a time, and are non-geographical. It's not that I am in one because the other guy is 10 miles from me, and I am not in another one because my buddies are 1,000 miles away. I can literally be everywhere. So the political shape of a new organization that I call the Network Society is expressed by this powerful vision of global participation. Under certain measures, microbes are still the dominating life form. By body mass, if you measure all the biosphere, microbes vastly outnumber everything else. But they never dream colonizing Mars. So similarly, we can let the nation states be. They will just have their elections and their nice rituals and parliaments and whatever. But the new structures that we are building are going to create things that nation states cannot even dream of, that we will create.
Maybe Wakanda will happen eventually, Scott. But I think...
Well, I was thinking Rwanda would make a good
Exactly.
Wakanda.
In fact, I think the irony of it is that it's already starting to happen with Iceland, with e-citizenship, and I'm pretty sure, you know, countries in Africa are not far, because, you know, when you're sitting with these opportunities, especially related to the economics of what it enables in a country, in terms of, you know, leapfrogging the infrastructure and closing the economic gap, it's, you know, it becomes more plausible to start imagining how, you know, through the blockchain and through streamlined governance, you can close that gap and make governments more efficient.
The African Union a few years ago was saying, oh my God, this euro thing is so beautiful, we should adopt a similar thing, a common African currency. No, leapfrog it, go direct to the blockchain and create a single blockchain-based continental currency.
Yeah, it could start with passports. I mean, it's quite straightforward. Yeah.
What would you, David, the last part of that question, which I think is quite valuable, could we just swap the slides around? What would you do now as a citizen? So all the stuff's changing, but what do we as individuals do today to be part of that change? In terms of this whole governance change that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, so all of you are incredibly important because you belong to that group that wants to know and wants to understand what the hell is going on. And you are taking the right steps, and you just have to keep doing what you're doing. All of the, a lot of what we are seeing around the world is a consequence of extremely shrewd political operators exploiting the fear and the ignorance of people who don't understand that they have a role in the future they don't feel part of. That is what is important. You are already on that path, so the most important thing you can do is to spread the message of hope and inclusion that we have a purpose, that we are part of the future society that cannot be born without us. Disaster, catastrophe, and apocalypse are perfectly possible. We only have to want them. But if we want to create an alternative that is delivering on the promise of human civilization in the 21st century, then absolutely the power of reason and understanding and the technology that brought us here are part of the answer, together with our human qualities of empathy and inclusion. And so making sure that you don't let the people who start from a position of fear let their hearts poison the environment around that, but you comfort and embrace them, because yes, we are confused and equally uncertain of the outcome, but we can only try to make the good things happen together.
Cool. Kevin, there's a question which was along the lines of the WealthE Coin, and someone was saying, you know, why should I look at it? Do you want me to answer it?
No, I mean, why should you look at it? Essentially, what Wealth Migrate are looking and are doing at the moment in terms of a platform that is opening up access to real estate opportunities on a global level, is something that no one else has been able to do to date. Number one, because there's just too much regulatory issue and a lot of middlemen, which makes it extremely difficult. The blockchain takes away a lot of the friction costs. And there, I believe that if you are going to be looking at different token sales, you should be looking at many different sectors in order to have sort of a basket of different coins. And if you're going to be looking at a real estate one, the WealthE Coin, okay, I'm biased, but it is backed by a company that has a track record, as opposed to the others that are pretty new. They really have an idea, and then the purpose behind Wealth Migrate, I think, is something that really resonates, at least with me. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then I would say, like, walk away, because that's really where it is pivotal. Is that the purpose is to minimize the wealth gap, to provide that access, to see people who've never had the opportunity to invest to be able to do that, and to make money in the process. And so that's, I think, what I...
Can I answer that too?
Yep.
I invested several $100,000 in WealthE Coin, and the reason I did that is because I believe that Wealth Migrate has both the proven capacity to execute on a plan that is ambitious and disruptive, and it is courageous to disrupt itself with the next generation of platforms that is going to rethink and re-implement its business model, fueled by the WealthE Coin, and it is going to be at the basis of an explosive expansion of the opportunities, and the team is ready to do that. The beauty of tokens is that they are both a mechanism for making financial resources available to those who can do, and they are also the technological basis for an expansion on a network of participation that is extremely nimble and fast to iterate in search of better and better solutions. So I fully believe that that Wealth Migrate will be successful in doing what it wants to do in the next several months and years, and as a consequence, the token will be, for me, a good investment.
So guys, thank you. What I've done actually is I've put in a bunch of my questions onto Slido. So the reason being is that then it actually allows us as a group to decide what people really want to know. So please go on Slido and you'll be able to vote them up. There's 26 questions up there now. So we won't have time this afternoon to go through all 26 questions, but I'd really appreciate if you want to either put your own questions or tick the ones that you're interested in, so that the best rises to the top. So let's start with the one at the top. And David, I know, and just by the way, for the other three people on the panel, including myself, we are all very conscious of the fact that we've all come here to learn from David as well. So, we're going to ask more questions from David than from the four of us. But just in terms of where does the world look like? And, I think, I'd love to get you to start off, David, in terms of where you see in 2019 in terms of ICOs and what's happening. So basically over the next 12 to 18 months. And then equally, Tyrone, Kevin, and Vu, I'd love your thoughts as well in terms of what does 29 look like? 12 months from now, what does it look like?
How many of you have heard of the distinction between, regardless of whether it is clear what the distinction is, but that there is a distinction between security tokens and utility tokens? Okay. So on the blockchain, there are these things that are called tokens, and they don't represent a share of ownership in a company. They can have all kinds of features, And the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States, it is a powerful regulatory body, decided that since they had a hammer in their hand, everything they were looking at was a nail. And that is what they did with the utility tokens in a very abusive fashion. On a blog post, the head of the SEC said, utility tokens don't exist. And it is really horrible because it is a preemptive action. It wasn't even any official guidance, which they did not release, of what would constitute a security, what would be a utility, etc. So China prohibited ICOs. The US, in practice, are very heavily acting against ICOs by refusing to give clear guidance on the federal level. Some states started to do that, federal guidance lacking. So that is one of the reasons for the last 3 months of bear market around the value of Bitcoin and in the ICO market in general. And it's funny because the skeptics who have been loud in their criticism from October to December, this enthusiasm is too shilly and all this increase in the exchange rate is unjustified. Now they are critical of the fact that there is a bear market and how come, and rather than being happy that it is a bear market, right? Which is an interesting way of looking at a critic who is reasoned against one that is really biased, because the second will be critical regardless in both of these cases, for example. So what is happening is that regardless of the regulations missing, there are people who are investing a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, and in some cases billions, creating a new infrastructure for the regulated exchanges that will be licensed by the SEC for trading tokens, utility tokens and security tokens. And there are literally trillions of dollars of institutional money ready to be invested in distributed ledger technologies, DLT, including security tokens, as soon as this infrastructure becomes available. And T0 is one, and there are others that you can keep your eye on. And they should be online around the summer, maybe by fall. And literally, it will be floodgates. The floodgates will open, and whether it is going to happen before the end of 2018 or it will be 2019, really, we have seen practically nothing. The internet boom of the end of the 90s created $3 trillion of wealth, which was the total market capitalization of the dot-com companies. And regardless of that crash and the bubble bursting, it really was the basis of the next 20 years of economic growth. But it was a very provincial thing that was born in Silicon Valley. So today, we are seeing opportunities globally, and this is going to be literally trillions and tens and hundreds of trillions of dollars of value that are going to be created and logged. Entirely new markets of things that we couldn't even measure before will be measured, and as a consequence will be valued, as in the consequence will create new markets. The economy is open-ended, and that is what we are going to create.
Just before the three of you jump in, I want to just play this slide. Some of you might or might not have seen it before, but this is what's happened in the coin token market. So you can see here, we're in 2014, and you can see, so down the bottom here, we're in 2014 there, and you can see by the end of the year, we raised about $35 million. You can see Ethereum, which David was the very first investor in Ether, which is on the Ethereum network. So now we're in 2015. 2015 wasn't a very good year. David already mentioned that Bitcoin went from 1,000 back to 300. And so it literally raised about $10 million in 2015. Then we go into 2016. And now we go into 2017, and you'll start to see why the regulators got excited. And there's the 5 or 6 billion that Vu was talking about. So anyway, back to you, Vu, in terms of where do you see 2019 in the space?
Yeah, look, Scott, I'm going to struggle to answer this one in 2 minutes. So if you don't mind, I'll take another 2, because how I want to contextualize my response is twofold. We're in a room filled with South Africans, or people who are South Africans in the room. And 2019 is primarily a year that we'll all be going to the polls and hopefully voting this time around and not staying away. And to be honest, the past 10 years has been really challenging for South Africa as a country overall. In fact, those of you who are wondering, my general feeling about the last 10 years is that Jacob Zuma has also been bad for black people as well. So you can rest assured that we've all suffered through the past decade. But I think on the flip side of that, I think there's really a renewed kind of sense of hope in terms of what the next 10 years looks like. And for me, when I look at these things, primarily I look at the growth of middle class, because that's what's going to define the next decade for Africa. And South Africa, in all intents and purposes, has been left behind and been dragged behind by corruption and the whole Gupta state. But I think primarily where we're going ahead now, and I think those of you who are paying attention to the news and are paying attention to the things that the current president, who's potentially going to be the new president of the country next year, is doing, not only in our country, but broadly in Africa, is the sort of stuff that all of us in this room here would appreciate, tenfold of it, at an even more frequent kind of pace at kind of implementing some of these strategies. Whether those things relate to job creation. Just today, by the way, there's happening right now in Johannesburg, is the land summit in South Africa that's going on. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that. At the same time,
I thought we were having it today. Technology and how we're solving the problems.
And at the same time, in fact, there were some good ideas coming out of Joburg. So Inga, there might be a project where you might need to crowdfund for your farm in the Eastern Cape soon coming on the platform. So just watch that space. But that came from Johannesburg. So one of the wealth partners in Joburg brought that opportunity through. But basically, I think that the reality of it is that we're going to, it's going to, for me personally, I'm willing to kind of put my head on the block on this, and that is premised on a successful kind of campaign for Ramaphosa going into 2019. Very much the next 10 years is all going to be boomtown for South Africa. So again, a good time for everybody in the room to really kind of feel a sense of positivity and a sense of kind of governance structuring in the country, and a more positive view in terms of where the middle class, especially the black middle class, is going to be going in the country. So that's kind of the politics and the dynamics of the country, hopefully in 2 minutes in a short summary. But generally, the other 2 trends that I personally watch, that I get involved in, is the number of women coming into the economy. The forecast will tell you that over the next 10 years, 1 billion women globally will be coming into kind of becoming part of the economy. Now, again, we all spend time with women in different guises and in professional areas. One thing that I've learned from working with women is that they do things differently, they think differently, they operate differently. What that requires is that now you're suddenly having this kind of balanced, diverse parity. The whole way that business is done globally is going to change. So if you don't have women in your space, I think Scott's doing a great job, by the way. There's a whole bunch of ladies in the WealthE Migrate team. And again, they strongly start influencing the direction in which a business is going to go, the kind of choices that businesses make. And this, again, combining that with the tech, with the positivity, I think is also going to have its own positive ramifications. And the last one is digital learning and where education is going, specifically around online, specifically around spaces related to decentralized kind of governance structures. And one of the things that David has mentioned as well in the past is that pretend it's the gold rush and you're kind of there in Johannesburg back in the day. Sure, the guys who are going to make quite a lot of the top-end money are going to be the guys who own the mines, but equally the guys who do very well, or guys and girls who do very well, are the guys and girls who bring the picks and shovels, who provide the support mechanisms to this entire infrastructure. Whether you're talking about AI or 3D printing or blockchain technology, any of these technologies are going to need multiple layers of support to kind of get them to the kind of mass adoption that the rest of the world needs to see for it to be fully adopted and fully running. And I think you saw in some of those slides that I shared earlier how that potentially could pan out.
Cool. So Kevin and David, you guys have, I've spent a lot of time with both of you in the last 6 months going to all these different conferences all over the world, meeting all these different tokens. So the top question there that most people have wanted is, with over 2,000 altcoins currently in play, what is going to define the value of a new token? So Kevin, I think what we do is let's start with you. And then I know David is not going to give away a secret sauce. He kind of went into a little bit at the Wealth Partner dinner last night. But I think my point being is that both of you give your perspectives on how do people choose between the 2,000 altcoins and what is value?
Well, when it comes to a utility token, really the value of the token is the value of the network that the token plays in or is used in. So there are a number of tokens that are out there where a white paper was written and they are building those platforms right now. And pretty much the members they have are the people who participated in the token sale and potential token holders. So I really do think it all revolves around the usefulness of the actual platform that the token is used on. So those tokens, and there are a number of them that are still available on the markets where people have stopped developing the initial company that was going to be linked to that token is dead. Yet it's quite interesting. The token still lives. There's actually a developer who lives here in Cape Town who developed a token very long ago, and it's still there. There's people who are trading his token, and he's doing nothing with it. It's absolutely defunct, but some people just find some sort of value in that. So those that actually have a business behind it that makes sense is really what you need to look out for, I believe.
Cool. And I mean, from David's perspective, to paraphrase what you said last night, you get about 15 applications a day to look at opportunities. So you're getting more noise than the rest of us. So how do you define value?
We have a process. We look at both objective and subjective criteria for filtering these. And actually, our goal is to refine this as much as we can, and then to open source actually the criteria, incorporating them in the Network Society app that will enable a decentralized due diligence process where people will be able to earn the Network Society token by being part of this filtering mechanism. In my opinion, this is one of the ways to overcome the silly decisions by Google and Facebook, who decided they don't want to have anything to do with crypto. And by sharing this, of course, the criteria themselves will be improved upon by so many people. It is, in certain ways, a very natural extension of the network of value that Kevin described, where the value is going to lead, rather than a certain specific activity in a certain specific industry or project, to the investment process itself across every possible industry. And there are some in our circles who believe that tokenizing business models will be a natural way to go. If you think about it, and this happens to me quite frequently, the business plan, a 30, 40-page document that a startup would create, was a sacred document. It was secret, shared only under non-disclosure, where you would dare to describe what you planned to do in a year's time or 2 years' time or so on. And today, that's the white paper. It's totally open source. And everybody jumps in and then starts criticizing it, and the team quickly revises it to put out an improved version as fast as they can. And it's beautiful because it accelerates the evolution of sustainable business models much faster than otherwise in secret would be possible.
Perfect. The question that's come to the top here, I'll answer quickly. What's the utility value of WealthE Coin? How will this unlock the Wealth Migrate ecosystem? So in simple terms, there's 5 areas in our business, and the WealthE Coin will incentivize, if you look in the white paper, and I've sent it all to you on the WhatsApp group. The first one is investment. So it'll effectively incentivize and help people through the whole investment process. The second one is due diligence. Now, a lot of people think that I'm mad, and this makes Henny very concerned when I talk like this, but you were talking about Wikipedia this morning. Imagine, and why could we not have a Wikipedia version of due diligence? Like if there was a good building here in Cape Town, and effectively a lot of people are participating, sort of like you just said with the token, the NSV token as well. So the second part is due diligence. The third one is education. So we've got a lot of education resources, people like Dolph, there's another guy called Sharif, there's a lot of people that we're bringing in. And you've got beginner, you've got intermediate, and you've got advanced education. And as people go through the process, they'll either be able to use their WealthE token to get education, or by doing education, they'll get WealthE token that'll enable them to do other things in the ecosystem. The fourth one is community. It's today. It's being part of the community, it's driving the community, it's participating in the community. And the fifth one is the purpose. It's out there to solve the wealth gap and to empower at least 1 billion people. And all 5 of those genres, what was really interesting at a board level is that when the board actually understood that the WealthE token was a very necessary next step for us as a catalyst to drive engagement and effectively drive the metrics through the platform. And that's the driver of it. It's not just a nice to have, it's not a money-raising mechanism, it's an essential part of the ecosystem. I don't know if there's anything that you would add to that, but...
No, that's...
Okay, the next question. Probably, David, this is for you as well. What do you think of the increasing focus of regulation on technology? Do you worry about the negative impacts similar to what happened in New York? So I presume that's with regards to the Bitcoin regulation in New York.
So we have a certain way of going about our problems and challenges, and we believe that we can appoint people who are almost as if they were predestined to lead us, right? And some of them may be, but the majority are not. They are as fallible and as confused as we are, but they are not even allowed to admit it. Even worse, there are perverse selection mechanisms that tend to find those people especially attracted and addicted to money and power, and then give them that very drug that they depend on, that they will pursue for the sake of it rather than for the good of the community. When we talk about politicians, and we have many of those in every country. So the promise of a new generation of government technology is really to improve accountability, transparency, to make it possible for professional civil servants to be incentivized for the things they do well, sometimes resembling a startup where they would have to pitch in order to receive the resources they want, and they would be held accountable for milestones that they achieve in order to receive the next. And token-based models of civic governance would mean that you can be part, or you can disengage from certain activities if you don't believe in them anymore. And if those tokens go to zero, then a particular department is defunded by, in practice. because everybody says, no, this is not working, this is all corrupt. I don't want you to hold on to my money anymore. Rather than tax money being collected centrally and then being spread out with no additional control and oversight by the public. So there will be a gazillion different experiments, and one of the beautiful consequences of a globally connected world and rapidly spreading information is that best practices are possible. You know, America America loves to hate China, and in a rather stupid way, where they blind to very cool things that China is doing. You know, nobody who has ever gone underground in a New York subway and then maybe a month later were in Shanghai or Beijing will still be under delusion that the Chinese are behind. You know, New York is so much behind, like 100 years, if you look at those subway systems. And just this morning, I read about such a cool application of this social credit system that the Chinese are putting in place, which everybody is horrified about. Oh my God, what happens, blah, blah, blah. As if in the US, you know, your credit score didn't already exist. Ford just announced a totally automated car dealership where you can just walk in and pick up a car for 3 days of no questions asked trial period with no human assistance based on your social credit score. Because Ford said, okay, this guy is cool, and why not we let him drive our car a little bit around?
But David, going on to that, in the UK, they actually have Zipcar. You know Zipcar, where you can actually, you go onto the profile on the internet, you can select from a dozen different makes of cars, and they actually send you a code to your phone, which they'll tell you where the location of the car is, and you just put the code on the dashboard of the car, and it unlocks the doors, and the car key will be in the cubbyhole. And that Zipcar is fully functional, whether you need a minivan or you need a people carrier, whatever the case is. They are already in place in getting those things.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, in China, when we were there recently, they've got $1 billion companies now that are bikes. You walk up with WeChat, you unlock your bike, and you ride it from A to B, and then you go find it again on your phone. And they're $1 billion companies. I mean, the one that had only been going a year and was making $20 million a day. Kevin, just on regulation, tell us a little bit about Puerto Rico. You were just there, because what's really interesting is that the big countries like America and China and Europe are trying to be very draconian in terms of the regulation, and smaller countries are opening their doors, and Puerto Rico is a classic example of this.
So yeah, I mean, we were recently in Puerto Rico, and in Puerto Rico, what the government is doing in order to look at rebuilding the economy since Hurricane Maria is to use incentives in order to bring people into the country. And so they have economic incentives like their Act 20, which means if you run a company from Puerto Rico, you only pay 4% corporate tax. And as an individual living there, you can there's zero capital gains tax for real estate in Puerto Rico. So that's one angle, but since the crypto community have sort of descended on Puerto Rico, their governor and the government structures have said, wow, this is an opportunity for us to actually work together with the community to ensure that the regulations that we put together are favorable towards the development of blockchain, but also ensuring that people are protected. And in Puerto Rico is one territory that is doing this, but there are many others. So of course Puerto Rico, being a US territory, puts it in sort of a different category, I guess, because it makes it safer for Americans. But if you look at countries like Gibraltar and their DLT regulations which have been released, or Malta, who released their DLT regulations, I think just yesterday. These jurisdictions really are making it favorable in order for companies that are based on the on blockchain technology to actually move there. I mean, Binance has just moved from Hong Kong to to Malta because of the regulation there, and so it's very interesting to see that the rock stars in the crypto world are the lawyers, right? So who would have thought that the lawyers were going to be the people who are the rock stars? And they are, because the regulators are so up and down. There's no sort of global regulation, and I mean, I know that there was talk of that, G20 countries saying, what could we do? But I mean, I think there's you're not going to really get 20 different world leaders and their governments all saying, yeah, let's do one thing all together.
Just on that note, so Bin Finance is the biggest exchange in the world, as I understand it. Yeah?
Yeah.
The one that's moved from Hong
Binance,
Kong.
yeah.
Binance. And I mean, it's gone to Malta, and what I find, I mean, we're in Malta, so the WealthE Coin is out of Malta because it's one of the most forward-thinking jurisdictions around where this technology is going. So I got a question for the panel. I don't mind who wants to answer this, because it's the one that's highest up here. Should I get involved in Bitcoin mining?
You had a good answer for it the other day.
Yeah,
You have the answer for all of it.
sorry. Bitcoin mining is often accused of being a waste. And the people who make that accusation don't realize that the reward that the miners receive in order to secure the network and the energy used in order to achieve that kind of transaction reliability that is unprecedented on a global scale is creating a planetary supercomputer that is going to gain more and more features, totally outstripping the computational capabilities of any Facebook or Google or whatever other private company. And any of you can just come up with an idea and then say, oh, I want to run this idea on that global supercomputer. And I invested in projects that are doing exactly that. For example, there is this company called Neuromation that successfully completed their ICO a few months ago with $66 million. They are using the mining for creating synthetic data to train neural networks for artificial intelligence applications. Very, very cool thing. And there are many, many others. Just like originally at the internet, it was only email and maybe news feeds, but then we created all kinds of new things like web browsing, real-time collaboration, video conferencing, and many, many other things. So Bitcoin mining is here to stay, absolutely, and in a guaranteed manner. Yes, it is better to use renewable energy. Just like for any economic activity, not using renewable energy sources not only is bad for the environment, but very soon it will be uneconomic. So I have a mining operation in Patagonia, Tierra del Fuego, which is the southern tip of South America, where it is very cold, and we have electricity sources available in renewable hydroelectric sources that otherwise would be wasted. The turbines wouldn't even turn, the water would just flow for free. Gravity would be doing its job. So anytime we take that energy, it is not that it would be used for something else, we are just using it for what we do. However, the important thing is that we didn't buy the mining equipment from the Chinese. We designed our own chips that are being produced on next generation 7 nanometer processes by Samsung, and so we will not be beholden to the weird mechanisms and dynamics of mining where the Chinese will test your equipment before sending it to you for 2-3 weeks, and that testing miraculously will absorb like 95% of the profit potential of the cards because of how the Bitcoin algorithm adapts to the available mining equipment becoming more difficult automatically. So yes, you will receive something that is still 5% profitable just so that you don't complain too much, but unless you produce your own mining equipment, it is difficult to make money in mining.
So if you never understood any of that, I guess the answer is rather avoid Bitcoin mining.
Look, there's a lot of scams and
Yeah.
and things, Scott. I think one has to just also, as usual, be very careful around what you're getting yourself involved in. And interestingly, just this past weekend, CNN did a feature on mining in South Africa. So if you have Google on you, it's on the Marketplace Africa program, and they basically did the whole coverage of again 2 different type of miners. One doing it on a commercial scale, a commercial operation, and one doing it on a kind of lighter, dumbed down operation. It was a Palestinian gentleman who had moved from Israel to South Africa to come and do that because of the affordable electricity in South Africa. And I mean, you know, again, it's a very good kind of explainer view of the risks, the inherent risks related to mining. So Marketplace Africa, really great feature, again, on South Africa.
Yeah,
I also just think that I think it's a good time to also just like sort of warn people when there's, you're probably not going to see a Facebook ad now because it's not going to be there,
yeah.
But you know, those people on Facebook who are saying, you know, I've been mining Bitcoin, blah blah, and I'm going to give you 17% a day. I mean, just
It is so simple. Anytime you buy a book that tells you how to win the lottery, the question is very naturally, why didn't the guy win the lottery rather than trying to sell you the book, right? So simple. So
Yeah.
people who are selling you mining capacity should be asking, you should ask them, why do you do that? Are you so generous?
Yeah.
Why aren't you just
very
keeping
good
the
point.
profit? Very simple.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sell you mining capacity.
Willem van der Post said when we were on a webinar and he got asked that, he pretty much said the majority of them are pyramid schemes. So you bring your money in and that money's being used to pay someone else, and it's pretty much a pyramid scheme. Gavin, this is probably a good question for you. As the CTO, someone's asking you when the app will be ready.
Mobile app.
Or, yeah, what does it say there? Development of Wealth Migrate
Who
app.
asked that?
Well, 6 people liked it.
Android. Cool. Android. Why are you using an Acer? Interesting. So when is the app going to be ready? That's a hell of a question to answer. So first, what we've got done at the moment, and Scott kills me when I say this, is we've got a really good POC. We've put out something that has proved a business concept. That's the platform as you currently prove it. It's raised $71 million US. That's a reasonably effective business concept. Now we've got to take that POC to an MVP. And it's not quite having exactly what we had before and just sticking a few things on the side and we've now got this new thing. Essentially what we're doing is tearing it down and doing it a slightly different way. If we do it the right way, and we are, it makes it a hell of a lot faster to develop an app, which is a long way of saying it's going to be slightly longer than I wanted to. So I'm not going to give you a deadline, but you're going to see a few subtle changes over the coming weeks and months, and then we're hoping by the end of the year we can start actually rolling out exponential changes, because once you have the architecture and the grounding in place, it's a hell of a lot easier to develop these things.
Awesome. Thanks very much. And I mean, at the moment, it is mobile responsive, so I mean, you can actually use your mobile at the moment on it. Okay, so this one is an interesting one, and I'm not sure who wants to answer it. How would a pan-African cryptocurrency, as proposed by Cyril Ramaphosa, affect the continent's economy, both in terms of growth and equality?
Wow. Gosh, where do you start with that one?
Well,
Look, there's so many use cases for it, right? So I think it goes back to the idea that Dave threw out there around, don't just leapfrog everything and just think about the multiple opportunities that I think it represents, from funding infrastructure to funding agriculture and food security, to looking at how, again, you can securitize the very things that, again, make Africa this kind of naturally rich continent. So again, right now there are people doing diamond registrations on the blockchain, primarily to protect one of the unique kind of assets that Africa has, and tracking that throughout the world. So that immediately has a direct impact around multiple things. Just here in Stellenbosch as well, the human capital context of Africa is also rethinking multiple things. I know of teams right here in Cape Town and Stellenbosch working on digital solutions to create new currencies for talented young people Africans are very talented people, to be able to utilize their skills as a form of value exchange. I know of young people in Stellenbosch who are digitizing and helping protect global content, whether music, books, anything. So the use cases are so many, Scott, I think, and I think it's going to save us on multiple. There's a saving side of the conversation, but there's equally an enabling side of the conversation as well. So, yeah.
David, I'd love your thoughts from because you talk about government and you mentioned Venezuela the other night, and
Correct.
It's interesting because
so
there's a pro and a con.
So it is very important to note that marketing people, wherever they are, including in government, are very good in misappropriating terminology and then using it in a misleading manner for their own purposes. So whenever you hear somebody talking about private blockchains or permissioned blockchains, you just delete the word blockchain, and then private and permissioned whatever, those are not going to be blockchains and cryptocurrencies, because per definition, a public blockchain and a decentralized cryptocurrency needs no permission from nobody, right? So the most important consequence of a Pan-African cryptocurrency, which, by the way, we could also say already exists and is called Bitcoin, is no political meddling. Whatever country, and I know nothing about Africa, whatever country thinks they have to protect their economy with currency controls, and they have to protect trade against unfair competition, and whatever these buzzwords, where each of these typically means that they want to delay the day of reckoning when inefficiencies and organizations and businesses that are unable to compete will die anyway. It will only be more painful because there was a dam holding back the tide, and then it will be a flood. That is not going to be possible anymore. And an open, regardless of certain recent tendencies, an open world where ideas and products and services and commerce and people can freely move and mix up and ask themselves smarter and smarter questions is better than the alternative. And the currency that can support this is here. And if we want to give it a new name and create a new blockchain, why not? We can do that too. It will disengage finance from the political process, and it will be so much for the better.
I think for the rest of Africa, it's really got to do with the education and the access to the technologies. I think, there was a statistic the other day that came out that the most Googled topic in South Africa is Lobola, and the second most Googled topic in South Africa is Bitcoin. So, I think the education behind the rest of Africa to get the access and the knowledge of the cryptocurrencies is also vitally important to moving forward.
So we don't have
Kevin was just saying that, can I use Bitcoin for Lobola? That was the question.
Only ducks, Kevin, not cows.
So guys, we've got about 7 minutes left until the tea break, and there's a question here that I think is really important, and I'd like to tie the two together. So it's the future of work, but I'd like to tie it together with effectively the education side, because it's how do we get our children ready for what's happening. And I've got a slide up here which I actually first got when I was at Singularity University 2 years ago, and I was absolutely shocked by this. So this was the unemployment that was predicted by the advancement of technology, And for some reason, and I don't know why, but for some reason I thought artificial intelligence and technology would really impact the first world more than the emerging world. That was just I don't know, I just thought that. And actually, when you look at it, it's quite astounding. I mean, China, 77% unemployment, South Africa, 67%, Ethiopia, 85%, Thailand, 72%. So I'd like to just go through each of you and ask, what do you think is the future of work? And on that basis, how do we prepare our children and ourselves to be set up for success in that future?
Look, I think, Scott, to be honest, I think those stats represent the opportunity cost for replacement of jobs. So, there's some room for arguing whether or not that would be the true reflection. But there's a number of things that I think are going on at the moment. Because I think the future of the world really relates to, where do these exponential technologies take us? Whether it's quantum computing or AI or as David said the other day, Industry 4.0 or IoT, which is pretty much the same thing, is, a lot of these industries still need to be prepared, and there's going to be new opportunities that I think we're not considering around what they unlock. In Joburg, Kevin spoke about micro jobbing and the growth of the industries around, just the doing kind of economy of consistently looking at it. In fact, on our platform at Uprise, we looked at potentially supporting an entrepreneur who was looking to raise capital in line with that, but obviously they struggled with some of the due diligence elements to prove it. But we're pretty sure that kind of idea is going to come back at 10 times. But I think in direct response to how do we protect the future for our kids, it's something that I'm already doing, certainly with mine. I've got 2 girls, 1 7, 1 5, and already my 7-year-old is reading at a grade 4 level, but is already kind of preparing for her first kind of robotics course at 7. Is preparing for her first coding academy course, and naturally she's been doing entrepreneurial programs and craft and little marketplace things since she was 5. So, you prepare the ground as best as you can, potentially forecast what potentially comes next. And part of that process is just the exposure of realizing that at a certain point, Peter Diamandis speaks about the point of singularity. The world will effectively be flat. Yes, we don't want to go into other things related to space travel and things, but for me, the world becomes flat to the point where you understand that all opportunities are available depending on what skills and knowledge you possess. Yeah.
Yep, awesome. Kevin?
Well, Vu pretty much stole what I was going to say. So yeah, I mean, essentially for me, I'm a big believer in the use of crowd and the fact that we're going to see a lot more people who are more migratory in nature, I believe, people who are not necessarily living in one place, and the fact that there's companies now that are completely decentralized because just of the nature of technology. It means that you shouldn't box yourself into any sort of particular area. I mean, I guess I'm a good example, being a pharmacist who just was like, I don't think I can do that anymore, so why not do something in technology? And there's many examples of that around the world. And is education and learning going to completely change? Potentially yes, potentially no. A lot of good technological advancements have come out of labs at universities, and so I don't think we can throw like the baby out with the bathwater in terms of all education is bad because it's in classrooms with a lecturer in front. So I think that the mentality that we use today is still the mentality from a linear thinking mindset. The world is moving more and more exponential. So look at the way you think and say, can I think differently? Is there a different way to look at this? I'm not a parent, so I don't have that like, damn, my kids, I need them to be X, Y, Z. So I'm not gonna comment on that.
You better start thinking about it.
Oh, dude, I mean, I'm going to live until 150 so I can have kids at 70.
Certainly instilling a can-do attitude in children of any age and making them pride of the things that they can try regardless of whether they succeed, but to strive for excellence is a wonderful starting point. Also, I agree that an extreme specialization that commits you to a 30-year career in a given profession was possible 30 years ago or 50 years ago, but today is extremely risky because of how interconnected and unpredictable the various professions are, and it is more valuable to have a skill where an interdisciplinary attitude is rewarded and applied, also, rather than insisting for isolated and relatively futile pieces of mere knowledge, insisting on methods for acquiring and applying knowledge can be an effective way for empowering children and adults who will use ever more powerful AI assistants, already knowing when a given battle was or when a given author died or what were the books that he wrote isn't something that anybody should memorize, but understanding how to search for that information and then how to apply it and what are the tools that can be used most effectively every month as new and newer tools comes out. That is the kind of curiosity that should drive children and adults alike.
Awesome. Tyrone?
Yeah, I think it sort of goes back to you know, when we were youngsters. I think the first time I got a cell phone I was about 18 years old, and now it goes down to sort of 7 or 8 and they're asking for iPhones and asking for all those things. So it just shows how technology is evolving and how the brain is evolving with the technology that's coming into play, and how you know, you look at all these things where you need to get hold of one of these large suppliers, or you know, like Momentum or Investec or whatever. You try and find a phone number and you can't find a phone number anywhere. You know, you sort of put in the keyword, you know, fault on account, for example, and then it brings up 10 different things, and then it'll sort of shortlist that, and then it'll bring up another 10 things. And after 10 minutes of browsing to find a phone number of what's actually wrong with your account or whatever the case is, you can't find a phone number. And you have to think to yourself, how many different channels of people have had to be let go for them to actually evolve into a system whereby you can't get hold of anybody. You know, you phone the phones and then a generated phone call will come through. But yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, in the, again, I mean, there's a lot of things like self-checkouts at the grocery stores. You know, you can go to grocery stores in you know, the UK and the US, and you can just take your groceries and you can just do your own checkouts. You know, and there's no actual physical cashiers there. So instead of there being 10 cashiers doing the checkouts, there's one person overseeing all of that. So then there's another 9 people looking for jobs. And I mean, in the UK, there was a thing on the radio that there was...
The question is, were those jobs worth having to begin with? I mean, this is the problem I have in South Africa. You've got 50-year-olds who are packers, we have 50-year-olds who are cashiers. I mean, it's not sustainable. I mean, the most advanced economies in the world, those jobs are pretty much reserved for anyone under 21, for expediency and job experience for young people. And this is how you don't build economies by keeping redundant jobs. And that's why I said that particular slide represents the opportunity cost of what could be replaced. So 67% of jobs in this country could be replaced tomorrow by machines or by AI.
But it is cheaper for them, though.
Exactly. Look at the flip side. Don't concentrate on, oh my God, those people are losing the jobs that they shouldn't have had to start with, because they are horrible jobs that machines can do, and as a consequence, people shouldn't be even doing. Look at the human potential that gets
100%.
unlocked.
Yeah.
Because those people can't do things that are worthy of their human talents.
Yeah.
But I mean, that slide especially says that. I mean, there are no jobs for them though. So you sort of got to create the idea that
I want us to be
where
careful.
must they
I
go?
mean, look, the reality of
So
unemployment
guys,
in this country...
can I? Sorry, I'm just conscious of the time here.
Yeah, sorry,
I'm
Scott.
conscious of the time. So
But
can
I'm
you
just
wrap it
saying
up
the
in
future
30
of
seconds?
jobs- The future of jobs shouldn't be about looking at the old way the world is run. We should very much... The most progressive way to look at society going forward is to look forward, to take the opportunity to leapfrog and to look ahead by I mean, this is the philosophy you live by, Scott, where you say, how do we drive that education to 1 billion people, where they can make that decision consciously because they've been given the opportunity to learn.
Yep.
And that's the beginning
But
point.
you have lawyers in the UK looking for cash out jobs. They've gone to university, they've got degrees, they've done their articles, and they're still looking for any job that they can find. So it's not quite as easy as...
David, the last, because we're going to wrap up for tea now. The last question I've got just for you individually is this universal basic income, because it actually comes into it. So if people are losing jobs, a lot of people talk about universal basic income. Yeah. What are some of the conversations you've had around that solution?
Yeah, so as we were hearing right now, obviously the scene both at every country or every community and as well globally is quite confusing. And it doesn't matter for somebody like me, a very optimistic outlook, to say that in 20 or 30 years' time we will have found a new phase and everything will be all right, because in the meantime people have to eat and pay rent and get there. And that is where the devil is in those details. So in order to weather the storm, some people are proposing the concept of universal basic income. And the critics of that approach say, well, that could never work because, you know, the social contract is if you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. So how can you get an income if you don't generate the value to society? And I believe in a kind of a mental hack to overcome the limitation of this reasoning, because we have things that exist and are wonderful and valuable, and they are part of a complex, larger entity. And those things are plants and animals, and the larger entity, we call it an ecosystem. And each of those components have value, and none of them get paid to be a bee, to pollinate the flower. It just does it. That's what it does, right? So human society is the thing that allows each of us to flourish. And each of us, in turn, are part of human society, necessary for human society to flourish. And I do believe that we are now on a threshold of realizing that we have become complex and valuable enough as a society and as individuals to reap the benefits of existing. And so rather than calling it universal basic income, I rather like to call it universal basic wealth. Because just as you buy a building that yields dividends or through the years that it pays out your investment, our investment in society is to exist, to do whatever we can in that society that cannot and should not measure our economic value as if that were what we were. Our being part of society is paid through a yield. That is what I believe can be implemented as a universal basic wealth. And you know, whatever that will be and however it will be, I think we will go there, because once again, the most precious resource is what we have is the human talent that we must preserve and reward and to let flourish.
Awesome. So I want to finish off with one word from each of you. It's 2028. You're basically looking back on 2018. You remember you were in some random venue here in Cape Town 10 years ago. And you're very grateful for where you've got to in 2028. And there was one thing that you did in 2018 that enabled you to get to 2028 successfully. what is the one thing that you think you should be doing in 2018 to make sure that you succeed in 2028?
Well,
You
that's,
start. Tyler.
that's a,
I'll start. So one of the things someone mentioned it earlier, but if you haven't read this book, not this book, actually, Bold, wherever Bold is.
Underneath.
This book, Bold. I would read this book. I think it's one of the best books to simplify and contextualize where we're going. You know, a lot of the stuff today can sound sci-fi and difficult, and I think Peter Diamandis did a wonderful job here in explaining where the future is going and how we can embark on being part of it. So that's my one.
He even dedicates a whole chapter on crowdfunding, so
Yeah.
you could even find
We need the updated
Yeah.
version with ICOs.
I'll go first. I'll let you guys think about that. I think for 2018, I think the biggest thing for me would be the education on the digital currencies. I firmly believe by 2028, you're not going to see banknotes, or you're not going to see a hell of a lot of firm cash. Yes, in the rural areas, and yes, in these, the various areas that don't have access to technology, maybe. But I think it's not far off whereby we're not going to actually have any money, physical money whatsoever. So I think getting to know it as fast as possible is key.
Great, thank you, Tyrone.
well, the simple answer is that I will be happy to have invested in Wealth Migrate.
Fair enough. We'll move on.
For me, it is always a privilege to be admitted to interface myself economically and in terms of exchanging ideas and in other ways with passionate people like Scott and his team. So that is for me the best return on the investment of my time, really, which is currently the most limited resource we have. And so the investment of being here and share these hours with you, I'm pretty sure that 10 years from now I will look back as Google Photos will show me, hey, a reminder, this is what you were doing, and these are the photos from 10 years ago. It
Didn't
does
have
that
grey hair.
already.
Already,
It already
exactly,
does that.
What
So-
was I doing in 2018?
yeah. So I will smile with these beautiful photos. I took a panorama actually as I was here of all of you and posted it on Twitter or something. So I will just smile and say, wow, that was great. So thank you very much.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, David's sort of stolen mine a bit. I mean, mine is investing. I think by 2028, I'll be happy that I invested in certain relationships with certain people, because I still think that is key to being successful, and is really surrounding yourself with people who know more than you and learning. So, that's what it would be. It would be the constant learning that's, yeah.
And buying Labolo with Bitcoin and finding a wife. Okay.
For me, I think Scott is embracing the opportunities that presents themselves to us on a daily basis, and rethinking the context to which we understand complex issues. So one of the things that I'm working very hard at doing right now is no longer using the term fintech, because it's gotten so wide and so broad and so diverse that it doesn't make sense to call it that. Basically, everything now has become very much integrally involved with technology, especially the financial services industry. So, one of the areas in which I'm certainly participating and getting involved in is the digitized stokvel. It's primarily, I mean, you and I said in Joburg, we're going to have this conversation even more, where we say, how do we, at the personal level, and the government's creating these very fun policies to allow more people to start saving, but we've got these very kind of archaic, old school frameworks for thinking around what saving is about. And stokvel is one of those. That's quite a big kind of enabler for a mass group of people, again, the crowd, to collectively come together to fund common goals. And some of the ones that we're participating in now are likely to be the real, true kind of tools that enable the future, because sometimes it doesn't need necessarily 10 million rand. It just needs incremental 1 rand at a time, when you have the money in your own pace. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you.